Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. So I wanted to react to an article that is commenting on the recent UK Supreme Court ruling that clarified the purpose of the Equality Act 2010. The Times contributor Natasha Radmehr, she has written this piece expressing her concerns about how this is going to affect transgender people, about how this is going to cause them to be put in a situation that causes them distress. So it isn't a long article, unlike that New York Times article about San Jose State. So I'm going to go through each of her points and respond. So she says, the concept of sex is binary, says the Supreme Court, but the implications of last week's ruling aren't exactly clear-cut, if the past few days are anything to go by. I have seen so many conflicting interpretations floating around that it is difficult to know how all of this will be executed and policed in reality, at least until the Equality and Human Rights Commission issues its new statutory code of practice. A few outcomes seem likely, though. Plenty of people will perceive clarification of meaning or change of interpretation as maintained by Melanie Field of the Equality Act in 2010 as permission to be more openly hostile towards trans people who are now other in the eyes of the law. The judge, Lord Hodge, can stress all he likes that the ruling should not be seen as a triumph of one of the two groups in our society at the expense of another, and that transgender people are still legally protected from discrimination. But what is the average person paying attention to? Those words, or the image of JK Rowling puffing on a celebratory cigar? So first of all, we need to take the emotion out of this and look at it simply as a matter of law. The Supreme Court of the UK offered clarification, some much needed clarification, and they had to be integral, they had to be honest in the true purpose of the original Equality Act 2010. That's all they did. The question is, did they have men who identify as women in mind when this act was written? Or was there an understanding that there are two genders, that there are two sexes, male and female, and we want to afford protections to both sexes? And Natasha talks about hostility, but she fails to mention the hostility towards women, many of whom have suffered violence simply for objecting to men being in their spaces, to men who supposedly identify as women being in their spaces. No mention of the hostility that women have faced over the years, being labelled, many of whom have faced hostility and also lost their jobs because of incorrect interpretation of certain acts that were simply there to afford sex-based rights. They weren't there to appease the feelings of certain men. They weren't there to promote gender ideology. So of course the Supreme Court had to offer clarification, and that was their only purpose. It wasn't to demonize any groups. Even the judge said that we can't even see it as a victory for either side, that it simply is what it is. Of course, we are going to see it as a victory though, because many women have suffered hostility and been discriminated against over the years. And the purpose of the clarification isn't to single out a particular group and to send hate their way. It's to simply make sure that the law is applied correctly. That means that women don't have to worry about being taken to court because they don't regard a man as being a woman, like what's going on in Australia at the moment with Giggle versus Tickle.
This is insane. I mean, for a decision by a private company to say, listen, this is just for biological women, that you have to go to a court in the first place and that you lose and that it costs you years of stress and costs. Why are you fighting this?
To be honest, because it is important. I mean, this is truth and reality. This is just the bedrock of society. This could happen to anybody. I mean, I've learned the hard way that if you don't believe in gender ideology in this country, the federal court is not on your side. The Australian Human Rights Commission is not on your side. This started as an AHRC complaint, and then they intervened in the first round to interpret the law. They interpreted the Sex Discrimination Act to be on the side of men who claim to be women. They've applied again to intervene into this next round, into the appeal. And so I think, when you're fighting gender ideology, like so many of us are, it is freedom of speech, freedom of belief, and freedom of association, which is the fact, like what we're actually fighting against. It's not just me. It's so many women. It's Louise Elliott. It's Moira Deeming. It's Angie Jones. It's Kirralie Smith that have been affected. And the reality is that anybody watching right now, it could be you next. If you don't believe in gender ideology, they can do this to you.
Well, they can actually ruin you as well. This is costing you, I can't imagine how many tens of thousands of dollars. The last time you were on, you said you needed financial help to appeal this judgment. What can viewers do to help you out?
Yes, so the first round was just over $500,000, and I mean, this one is going to shape up to be around the same. And then if we have to go to the High Court after this, which is a possibility, to say that men aren't women. So to help, it's make sure people are aware of it, and also to help with the legal funds, we do have a crowdfund. It's at gigglecrowdfund.com, and there's more information about the case, and every time there are updates.
Sal has been forced to go through the legal process, to force the courts to offer such clarification, to get them to admit that men are not women and can never be women. Laws that offer protection to women needs to be recognised as doing just that, rather than having a man say that he has every right to be in a women-only space on a women-only app that was designed for women seeking a safe space, free of men, an app that welcomes women who happen to identify as men. It's not a transphobic app, because trans people can be on the app if they're female. But what has happened is, because of these interpretations of certain acts, women have been forced to have men in their spaces. So thank goodness some clarification has been offered. And if you think that the law needs to be changed, then you need to get cracking and working on that. But don't take existing law and try and interpret it in a way that's favourable towards men and discriminates against women. I'm sick of laws that were there to protect women being used against women, like what the previous administration of this country tried to do with Title IX. Literally took something that was there to protect women, to ensure that they had the same opportunities as men, and rewrote it so that it could be used against women, and that even women could be accused of harassment for not allowing a man into their space, or objecting to a man being in their space, in their restrooms, in their locker rooms, in their dormitories, in their sorority houses. So this isn't about creating hostility towards somebody. And if JK Rowling wants to post a picture of herself celebrating, a picture that makes people chuckle, certainly doesn't encourage people to send hate towards anybody, she has every right to do that. These trans activists take the most simplest thing, something that is so light-hearted, and they try and demonize it and act as if it's a weapon against them, or a weapon against trans people. Nope, she just posted a photo of herself relaxing and welcoming the news. It says plainly in the judgment that it is not the role of the court to adjudicate on the arguments in the public domain on the meaning of gender or sex, or on the meaning of the word woman, other than when it is used in the Equality Act. But I've already seen the ruling wielded as evidence of the validity of anti-transgender sentiments. It will be used, even if that is not the intention, to stoke an already fiery, incandescent culture war. Again, when it comes to the job of the court, it's for them to make a ruling without the emotion, without the hyperbole. And thank goodness for judges who are still able to do that, because gender ideology seems to have crept in even into our legal system. That's why I say the ruling last week was a victory for law, as well as a victory for women, a victory for common sense, all of the above. Thankfully, due to this ruling, a man cannot wave a piece of paper at us and say that you have to accept me as a woman, you have to accept me into your private spaces that were there to protect you from men, and allow me in because I have a piece of paper. Thankfully, the Supreme Court understands that a piece of paper doesn't make a man a woman. And that certainly was not the intention of the Equality Act 2010. They know that, and everybody knows that. Again, if you don't like it, then you can start campaigning for new laws, but don't take existing legislation and pervert it. Thankfully, the Supreme Court were not willing to do that. And of course, she ends it with this little gem. This is just the beginning. Forcing trans women to use male single-sex spaces, or trans men to use female single-sex spaces, will cause more distress than the present setup. And as we all busy ourselves spending time and money on the creation of third spaces, under the guise of keeping women safe, we will see no reduction in violence against women, because trans people are rarely the perpetrators. Cis men, overwhelmingly, are. And of course, no mention of the distress caused to women, because their spaces were opened up to men, No mention of that whatsoever. While she's worried about some entitled men having their feelings hurt, Natasha fails to worry about the women who have actually been assaulted as a result of opening up their spaces, who have actually endured SA, not just grown women, but young girls too, in school. No mention of the women who were assaulted in prison because for some reason they thought it was a good idea to allow a male predator, somebody who is in prison for harming women, for SA-ing women, they thought it was a good idea to let this person into the women's prison to share spaces with women, giving this person, this predator, access to women. It's very naive to take somebody who's a predator, who's a murderer, who's exercising a fetish, and to consider them an angel just because they have the trans label. Apparently, that turns them into an angel who we can all trust and welcome with open arms into our space, even if they're a convicted predator, as long as they have the trans label. How dare we question them? How dare we call them dangerous? That's bigotry. These people want women to go against everything that we have been taught for our own survival, to accommodate these entitled men, some of whom are predators, some of whom are dangerous, have no business being given access to women. And you can say, well, it's cis men. No evidence of that whatsoever. The majority of women who have been assaulted in prisons were assaulted by men who claim they identify as women. Otherwise, they wouldn't be allowed in a women's prison if they didn't identify as a woman. So this is the issue. And it's the same thing over here in the US. Whenever you have a policy that says that a man can use a woman's space because of his gender identity, that opens up the woman's space. So that means a man can walk into a woman's space without question and not be stopped or restricted from doing so. That endangers women, whether you want to admit that or not. So while you're worried about the distress caused to transgender people because they have to use a single stall bathroom or because they have to use the bathroom that aligns with their biological sex, think about the women who have actually been physically harmed as a result of these reckless policies. Now, if you're worried about how these trans-identifying men are going to be welcomed into the men's bathroom, maybe they're going to be met with hostility, then talk to men about that. Leave women out of it. I have no problem with a woman who identifies as a man being in the bathroom with me. I don't care. She's female, she's female. I'm not bothered about how she looks. Why is the onus on women to endanger themselves and welcome men into their bathroom? Why don't you go and talk to men and tell them to be more tolerant? I don't know how men feel about transgender individuals walking into their bathroom, men in dresses walking into their bathroom. I don't know how they feel about that. Go and ask them and tell them to be more tolerant. Tell them to be more welcoming. Don't tell women that they have to give up their privacy. They have to give up their safe spaces that were designed for their protection in the first place. It's absolutely disgusting that women have been dragged into this in the first place. It's only women's sports that are affected by this to any significant degree. It's only women's spaces, women's safety that has been affected and impacted by gender ideology more than any other group, women and children. Women's distress has been ignored, demonized, painted as trivial, petty, selfish, mean. Men's distress? Well, that's of infinite importance. No one is making them use men's spaces. They're completely welcome to not use them. The only rule is that they don't use women's spaces. Why do they always act like these people do not have alternatives? They don't have options? I don't care if a man is having a mental issue that causes him to reject his sex. Access to naked women and girls is not a mental health treatment. Amy E. Souza. If anything has been made clear in the last 5 years, it's that they do not care about women. So many more people than I realised do not give a single F about women and girls. So thankfully the Supreme Court was objective. The Supreme Court were able to interpret and clarify the law and the purpose of the Equality Act. And that is simply to afford sex-based rights to everybody, including women, rather than infringing upon those rights to accommodate men who already have their own sex-based rights. Thankfully, a little piece of paper doesn't turn a man into a woman in the eyes of the law. So let me know what you think. Thanks for watching. Like, comment and subscribe. Take care of yourselves, and God willing, I will see you in the next video.